I'm Chloe. I hope that you enjoyed the story of the Chrysanthemum, Aspiration for Uprighteousness. Today we're going to be breaking down the important aspects of the text and looking at how we can create a summary of it in English to make it easier to understand and explain. Then I am going to have a conversation with my good friend Quenna about the text. Quenna, could you just introduce to everybody who hasn't met you before and tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Okay, hi, my name is Quenna. I am 26 years old and I am originally from Johannesburg, South Africa. Yes.
Thank you.
I have been in China for 1 year, 3 months.
After we finish looking through the text, Quenna and I will be discussing the story together. So, let's start off by breaking the story down. We need to bear a few things in mind. We need to think about who the main character is, the kind of person he was, what he did, the consequences of his actions, and why it was important. Our main character is Tao Yuanming. Now, there are a few ways in English to say main character. Other nice expressions include protagonist and the hero of our tale or story. All of these would be good ways to introduce the most important person of the story. He is first described as having no affinity for authority and power. And we can learn from this that he wasn't quite suitable for a life of fame and power. Maybe this means that he was quite a modest or humble person. And both of these adjectives would be nice words to use in our summary. We need to think a little bit about the historical background at the time, because his attitude would have been quite problematic at this time. For much of China's long history, there was a rigid exam process to become a court official. Tao Yuanming was participating in this system, but this was during the Eastern Jin dynasty, when there were many problems in the royal court which he disagreed with. So all of these things we could include in our introduction. An interesting point to note is that in many Western cultures, history tends to be recorded in centuries rather than dynasties. So it could be helpful in creating an English summary to mention that the Eastern Jin dynasty lasted from the 4th to the 5th century AD. Next, we need to think about his reaction. So, what did he do about it? In the text, it states that he relinquished the writing brush for the iron hoe and exchanged his official's robes for the farmer's straw hat. If we wanted to express this simply in English, we could say that he gave up his official position, retired to his hometown, and spent his retirement growing beans and chrysanthemums. As for the consequences of his actions, the text tells us that there were people who did not understand his way of life. For many people of the time, this would have been a surprising thing to do. His career was taking off, but he chose to turn his back on it to dedicate his life to growing plants. In our summary, we need to express that this was a surprising thing to do. Many people asked him why he did it, and he explained it by describing the human characteristics that these plants symbolized for him. He felt that these flowers showed good examples of how people should behave. A nice way to describe these good behaviors would be human virtues. The last thing that we need to express is that the characteristics that he ascribed to chrysanthemums in this exchange and his subsequent poetry have become important metaphors in Chinese culture. So now let's try and summarize that briefly. The hero of our tale is Tao Yuanming. He was a modest person who didn't care too much about fame or fortune and became disappointed with official life at the time of the Eastern Jin dynasty, which lasted from the 4th to the 5th century AD. In fact, he gave up his official status to return to his hometown to plant beans and, more importantly, chrysanthemums. And it is the chrysanthemums that would become so important to this story. Many people asked him with surprise why he had given up so many opportunities and devoted so much of his life to becoming a farmer. But he explained by describing the noble human characteristics that these flowers represented to him. Since this time, chrysanthemums have been used as metaphors for many human virtues. So now, I'd like to introduce my good friend Quenna, who has also just read the story. Quenna.
Hi, Chloe. What you said was very interesting, but there are a couple of things I'd like to ask you about.
Okay, of course. What would you like to ask?
Could you summarize for me what symbolism Tao Yang Ming wanted to show in his description of chrysanthemums, and how did they reflect his own life?
That's a really good question. He wanted to show a variety of characteristics, the first of which was resilience. He wanted to show how these flowers could still thrive in spite of so many difficulties, such as cold weather. Chrysanthemums are very hardy plants, which can withstand frost and severe cold. This reflected his own difficulties in his quest to achieve official status.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Well, there's more. He also wanted to use chrysanthemums as an example of humility. He says that chrysanthemum blossoms are not flamboyant. They lead their own private lives.
Oh, I see. So is he saying that because chrysanthemums are beautiful but are not the most extravagant flower, that they represent restraint?
Yes, that's exactly it. He was warning us against the dangers of being boastful and arrogant. Maybe these were characteristics that he had not appreciated in others when he was an official. He had a lot of praise for both chrysanthemums and pine trees. He felt that both of them represented characteristics that human beings should aspire towards. Do you think there are any lessons that we can still learn today from this story?
Well, I think there are many. Tao Yang Ming seems to be a person of great moral character. I really like the way he uses plants to represent the virtues that he respected. And I think we should all still aspire to those standards today. However, there's one thing I'm still not too sure about. I didn't know what to think of his description of chrysanthemums as being like hermits or people who live cut off from the rest of society. What did you think about that?
Yeah, he was expressing the injustice of the system he was living in, and I think that was very much a product of his own experiences. He lived in a very different time. The modern world is far removed from then, and nowadays it's very important that everyone learns how to work together. There is something that I would like to ask you. Do you think there are any parallels between this story and any aspects of Western cultures?
Well, I do know that flowers have a lot of symbolism around the world.
Really? Can you give me any examples?
Oh yes, in Western cultures, flowers have had great significance for centuries. One of the most famous is the red rose. Many people know it as a symbol of romance, but is also a symbol of one of the dynasties of medieval England, and it's still the national flower of England.
Why do you say England? Why not the UK?
Because the UK is made up of 4 parts, and they all have different national symbols. For example, the national flower of Wales is daffodil.
The daffodil. I've heard of them, but I don't see many of them in China.
They are a very common flower in northern Europe. They have yellow petals and are shaped a little bit like a trumpet. In fact, one of the most famous poems in English is about daffodils. It was written by a man called William Wordsworth. To many people, daffodils represent springtime.
Oh, that sounds a lot like Tao Yanming's description of chrysanthemums. He describes how they react to the seasons. Are there any plants in Western cultures that have the same significance of being so resilient in difficult weather conditions?
Oh, definitely. The first one I think of will be holly.
Oh, yes.
It is an evergreen plant and bears fruit in the height of winter. When many trees have shed their leaves, the red berries of the holly bush provide us with color and hope for this coming spring.
Yes, I heard that there's an interesting story about flowers related to a lady called Anna Jarvis. Do you know anything about that?
Oh yes, Anna Jarvis was an American lady who wanted to gain more respect for the mothers of the world. She helped to set up International Mother's Day, and she made carnations the official flower of the day because they were her own mother's favorite flower.
Oh. Tao Yangming was a great poet, and his descriptions of chrysanthemums were integral parts of his poetry. Do plants or flowers also have this kind of tradition in Western artistic traditions?
Without doubt, the natural world has provided so much inspiration for the great artists of the world. In fact, in addition to landscape painting, we even have an expression in the Western art world, still life, which is a genre that specifically uses flowers, fruits, and other plants as symbols of expression. Some of the greats from this genre included Matisse, Caravaggio, and Renoir. It is so great to hear about the ways that different plants have influenced so many different people from across the globe.
Yes. Well, this has been really fascinating. I think we can both agree that flowers and other plants have provided so much inspiration across so many centuries. It's been fantastic learning about the Chinese meanings and sharing aspects from Western culture. Thank you so much, Kwana. A goodbye from me and
a goodbye from me.
bye-bye.